Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome to Nodes. In this complete video, we will be discussing about Redux. It will be a complete crash course of Redux, and we will implement Redux with the help of Redux Toolkit in React.js application. Okay, so this complete crash course will be related to React.js because we will be discussing about Redux in context of React.js. Okay. So here I've created Markdown, and obviously the link to this Markdown will be provided you in the description, and I will upload this Markdown as a GitHub repo in a public repository. Okay, so let's get started. So the very first question which comes in our mind is that why Redux? Okay, so let's say the easiest answer to this is that because Redux helps the to manage our state in only one place, and that one place is known as the Redux store. Okay, and since we are managing our state in one single Redux store, so every component in our application can access the same state from that place, which is our Redux store. So this concept is also known as a single source of truth, because we are having a single source from which we can get the state and update the state. Okay, so that's the concept of Redux. Okay, so let's discuss that what are the scenarios in which we have to use Redux in our application. Okay, and again it will be obviously will be in context of React.js, and obviously the component I'm talking here about is the React component. Okay, so here you can see that I'm having a mock of an e-commerce website. On the left side we are having some categories in which we can select a category, and all the products which are belonging to that category will be displayed on my application. Okay, and on the top side we can see that we are having a search bar, a add to cart icon, and a user icon. Okay, now let's assume that whenever we add any product to our cart, so our cart get updated, and the number of products which we add to the cart would be displayed in this marker right over here. Okay, so this is one of the scenarios in which we can use Redux, because since we know that these products will be belonging to a separate component, and this cart will be belonging to a separate component. So how to manage such thing that whenever we click on this button, so the carts, so the items which are added to the cart should also be reflected at this icon as well. Okay, so that's the concept which we have to deal now. Okay, so let's for simplicity, let's break this application into React component, something like this. Okay, so let's say we are having our main component, and inside our main component we will be having our sidebar component. Okay, so for now let's just make it side by side so you guys can understand it easily. Okay, so let's say this is my mock and this is my component diagram. Okay, so this is our main component. Inside our main component we will be having our sidebar, which is this one, and inside our sidebar we will be having our categories list, and that category list will be a single category right over here. Okay, so we are having 1, 2 and 3 subcomponents right over here. Okay, and after that we will be having our header, which is this header right over here. Inside header we will be having our search component, which is this one, search component, and then we will be having our icons. Okay, and inside icons we will be obviously will be having our cart icon right over here. Okay, so I have displayed this cart icon right over here. And after that we will be having our main component, which is this our main component, and inside our main component we will be having our products, and every products will be coming from a single product card. Okay, so we are having just a list of products, and then we are having a single product card right over here, and that single product card will be having our add to cart button. Okay, so this is a simple scenario in which you break your application into React components. Okay, so whenever we want to pass data from our parent to child, we use props for that, and whenever we want our child to communicate with our parent, we use our callback functions. Okay, so you guys can say callback functions, or you guys can say that we pass a reference to our child function, the function reference. Okay, so that's the overall concept. Now let's assume that we have a scenario in which whenever the user click on add to cart button, the quantity gets updated on this cart icon logo. Okay, so we are having one this component which is using our state, and the second component is this one, single product card, which needs to use our state. Okay, so let's say there is a concept in React which is known as lifting the state up, because we cannot keep the state in this component or this component, because if we keep our state in this component we cannot access in this one, and for accessing this one we have to go up, and then we have to pass this down. So it gets a little bit complex, not a little bit complex, but it gets a lot of complexity. Okay, So what we can do is we can use one of the solutions, which is lifting the state up. Now lifting the state up means that whenever we are having several components which need to reflect the same changing data, we recommending lifting the shared state up to the closest common ancestor. Okay, so what we will do is, since we know that this icons will be sharing our state and this single product card will be sharing our state, so we will lift the state up to the most common parent. Okay, since the most common parent of these two components is this main component, because this will be sharing all the subcomponents right over here. Okay, so what we will do, we will lift our state to this main component. So that's why I have placed a tick mark right over here, that we will maintain our edit card products in this component right over here. So this is one solution of lifting the state up. But yes, it is one of the solutions, but the problem here is that still it is complex, because from our main component we have to pass the state down to main content, then to products, and then to single product card. Okay, so which gets very much confusing. And same goes for this icons component as well. We have to pass down to the header and then the icons. Okay, so still there is very much complexity involved in this. Okay, so lifting state up can be a solution if you're working on a simple scenario, but for complex scenarios there is only one solution, which is a state management tool, and for that we need Redux, because Redux is a state management tool. Okay, so let me just close this for now and let's get back to the solution. Okay, so one of the solution was lifting the state up, but it is still complex. So let's get to the main solution. The main solution is using the Redux store. So let me just zoom out for a while. And the solution is that we will create a Redux store, and Redux store is a place where we will keep our main quantity. Okay, so this main quantity, that the tick mark you can see now has been shifted from our main component to our Redux store. We will keep the main quantity here, and after we configure Redux, this gives us the ability to interact with the store anywhere in your React application. Okay, so each component in your React hierarchy can easily interact with this Redux store, can get that information, and also can update that information. So this is the power of Redux. So let's say if a single product card, whenever we click add to cart button, this icon needs to be updated, so it will interact with this store and will update the quantity. And once the quantity is updated, it will automatically be reflected in this icons, because since it is also connected with our Redux store. So that's the power of Redux, that every component in our React hierarchy can easily interact with the store and can get information and also update information in our Redux store. So that's the power of Redux. Okay, so let's scroll down and let's understand the working of Redux, that how we need to integrate Redux in a React application and what is the flow of Redux. So let me just zoom in for a while and let's get to this diagram. Okay, so let's say we are having our UI component, and UI component by meaning of UI component means that this smog right over here. Okay, so this is the UI which is being displayed on our browser, and this is right now the quantity is 0, and just assume that this 0 means the cart icon which is displaying that the quantity of products added in the cart for right now is 0. Okay, and then we are having add to cart button. Okay, so this is the UI part, and this UI is directly connected with our Redux store right over here. You can see that. So this is our Redux store, and this store is having that state, and that state is directly connected with our UI component. And for connecting that state from our store to our React components, we need a provider, and this provider is provided by React Redux Library. Okay, so React Redux Library will provide us this provider, which will help us to wrap our React components with this store, so that every component in our application can access that Redux store. Okay, so right now you can see that our quantity is 0 in our state, which is inside our store. So the store is having a state of quantity 0, and that quantity 0 is being provided to our React components, and it is being displayed 0 right over here. Okay, so let's say now user clicks on button add to cart, that it is that the user is adding some products to the cart. Okay, so whenever user click on add to cart button, an action will be dispatched. Okay, so what is an action? So let me just okay, I cannot zoom further. So what is an action? Is an action is some type of you can say a callback or a hit or an event which is being fired on this click button. Okay, so the user will fire an event which is called an action, and that action will be having two different things. Okay, number one will be the type of action being dispatched, and number two is that some extra information. Okay, so let's say I will write down here. So they will be having two different things. Number one is type of action being dispatched, and number two is some extra information. Okay, extra information, and we usually call that extra information as payload. In our case, the payload will be obviously will be, let me write it down. The payload will be the current quantity. Okay, TI okay, so it will be the current quantity. So these are the two parameters required to dispatch an action. So whenever the action will be dispatched by clicking on this button, we will provide that what will be the type of action. So let's say in our case we are saying that the action is to increase quantity. Okay, so in our case the action will be increase quantity, and the payload will be having the current quantity. So let's say user is adding one product into the cart. So right now the quantity will be equal to 1, and the type of action will be equal to increase quantity. Okay, so when the action is being dispatched, once that you fire an action, the action will go directly into a concept which is known as reducers, and these reducers will be directly connected with our store. Okay, so what reducers will do is reducers will check for the logic which has been registered against any action type. Okay, so what we will do, we will write reducers. In reducers we will write logic against action type. Okay, so and that logic is completely dependent on us, that what we want to do with the state. Okay, so once an action is being fired, it will come to reducer. The reducer will check the logic against the action type being fired. So it will look into the reducers that are we having an action of increased quantity. If there is an action of increased quantity, so go and see that what is the logic behind that action. Okay, so once there is an action, go and execute the logic, and that logic will be doing something with the state. In our case, it will just increase the quantity to 1. Okay, so what once the reducer logic has been executed, the quantity gets to 1, and this provider will automatically notify all the components that yes, something has been changed in the state, go and update yourself. So it will automatically make this counter 0 to 1. So that's the overall flow of Redux. So I think that's the enough theory for understanding how Redux works and why do we need Redux. So let's jump into a practical demonstration in context of React and see that how we can work with Redux. Okay, so before going to implement our Redux in our application, I just need to mention one more thing. So that's this Redux with Redux Toolkit. Okay, so now yes, you guys can work with core Redux, but it is now depreciated. Depreciated means that the Redux founders and the Redux contributors, they have already told not to use the core Redux library, but use Redux with a library called Redux Toolkit. And this Redux Toolkit is just an abstraction over the core Redux, which help us to implement Redux in a simple and easiest fashion. Okay, so you can see that Redux Toolkit is just an official opinionated batteries included toolset for efficient Redux development. Okay, so if you want to efficiently integrate Redux in your application, so you guys need to use Redux Toolkit. Okay, you can somehow work with Redux, core Redux, but it is a little bit complex to implement, and it's not having some of the abstractions which comes with Redux Toolkit, and that abstraction very much help us to implement Redux in our application. So this is the overall diagram. So let me just zoom out for a while. So let's say we are having core Redux. In our core Redux we will be having our main Redux library and a React Redux package which help us to bind Redux with React, and above that we will be having our Redux toolkit, which just provides an abstraction over the core Redux layer. Okay, so this is the core Redux. It provides the abstraction, and with that abstraction we will be using that abstraction inside our React application. So we will just need two packages. Number one will be the Redux toolkit, and the second one will be the React Redux, because we will be binding our Redux with our React. And this Redux toolkit also has the main Redux library, so we don't have to install the main Redux library in a separate package. Okay, so it comes with Redux toolkit. So that's the overall picture. So what we can do is we can just have to install these two libraries. After installing, we need to go through the steps. Number one is configure store. So let me just make it a side-by-side view to let you know that how things are working. So let me just come over here, Redux, and let's split to right. Okay, and let me just add a new tab over here, and this will be our Redux Toolkit. Okay, so here you can see, let me just come to the working of diagram right over here. So let me just make this one smaller and that one a little bit bigger, and let's collapse this thing. Okay, so steps for integrating Redux and React, we will see that how this diagrams maps to these steps. So number one is configure our store. So we will be configuring this store right over here, which is in a blue outline, and after that we will provide the Redux store to a React by wrapping the React app with our provider, and this is the provider which we are talking about. Okay, so we will take this complete store, we will provide this store to wrapper which is known as this provider right over here, and that provider will provide all the state information to our UI components. Okay, and the third point is obviously your first slice, and that slice will be containing your reducers, and these are the reducers which we were talking about. Okay, and this is the most important part, because in our reducers we will be implementing all of our logic. So inside our reducers we will define our initial state, which in our case will be quantity is equal to 0. And then once we define our initial state, we have to define the slice which contain reducers. So obviously our slice will be containing our reducers, and this slice keyword is just a keyword from our Redux toolkit library. Okay, so don't get confused. By meaning of slice means that just a slice of your state. Okay, that's all. Nothing confusing here. Okay, and then we have to define some actions. Obviously we need reducers to define action. Okay, and now we need to define action because we need to register our logic against some type of action type. So we will be defining our action types in this reducers as well. Okay, so the reducers will be having the actions, will be having the reducers, and will be having our initial state. So that will be the complete reducer part. And after once you register your reducers, you have to add that reducers to configure our store. So we will add these reducers inside this store right over here. Okay, so once you make your reducers, you will paste those reducers in your store, and that's it. This is the whole configuration. After that, you guys can easily interact with your Redux store with the help of two hooks which comes with the Redux Toolkit library. Number one will be the use dispatch, and number two will be the use selector. Now use dispatch is obviously from the word you guys can get the concept that use dispatch means if you want to dispatch some type of action. So we will use dispatch hook for that, and use selector hook will be for selecting data from Redux store. So if you want to get some data from Redux store, you can use selector hook. So that's the overall steps you guys need to implement Redux toolkit in your React application. So I think that's the theory of overall Redux. Now let's get to the practical demonstration. Okay, so welcome to the practical demonstration of our Redux toolkit implementation. And right over here you can see that on my left side I've created a boilerplate code of some of the e-commerce example which we were discussing, and this is having the same components which we have discussed in our markdown. Okay, so if you guys see in our markdown, we are having these components: main component, then sidebar, header, main content, then categories, then all these components. Okay, so if you look in my VS Code, we are having the same hierarchy right over here. Okay, so let me just make it something like, let me explain you. Okay, and this is our VS Code. Okay, so let me close this thing. Right now my server is up on port 5173, and you can see this is the same mock which we have discussed in our markdown. We will be having our categories, a search bar, and this is our product cart which is having right now the quantity is 0, and the user icon and all the products which are being displayed right over here. Okay, so let's just give you a quick walkthrough of the code which I have implemented. Okay, so let's say in our main app component, which is our main component, inside main component we'll be having a sidebar. Inside sidebar we are having some categories. Okay, so I've hard coded these categories in an array, and these are just some icons from font or some library. Okay, and then what we are doing is we are displaying these categories in a loop in a map function, and that map function is displaying each category in a separate component. So if I go over here, so this is the category component. Okay, so this means that we are having this hierarchy: main component, sidebar, and then we are having category list, and then single category. Okay, so that's the concept. So let's go back to our main component, and then we are having header. Inside header we will be having obviously our search bar. So this is our search component, which is just an input right over here. Okay, so search bar, and then we are having these two different icons which are coming from our header to a separate component known as icons, and inside these icons we will be having our this user icon as well as this shopping cart right over here, which you can see this one. Okay, so if I make this to, let's say 10, so it will be displayed 10 right over here. Okay, so for now let's say it's 0. Okay, then let's skip to our main component, and then we are having our main content, which are these product cards. Okay, so if I click over there, you can see that I'm hard coding some products which are having a title and a price. Okay, and that is being displayed in a separate product component, which is this product one. And in that product component, we are having this button, add to cart button, right over here. Okay, you can see that. And we are having the title of the product, which is something like this one, and the price of the product, and I'm passing this as a props to this product. Okay, so that's again the same structure we have created right over here to demonstrate the ability of Redux. Okay, so let's say somehow I will make it something like full screen, and let's get to our main app component, and let's say I want to make a state right over here. Okay, so the very first thing we will be discussing is about uh, lifting the state up. Okay, so lifting the state up means to maintain the state in the most common parent. Okay, so since we have discussed that our most common parent will be this main component, so let's create the state here. So let's say const quantity, TITY quantity, and then set quantity. Okay, and let me make it react dot use state, and that will be equal to 0. Okay, so we have done with this part. So let's go to our markdown, and we have done with this part. Okay, so this tick means that I've created our state and main component, and now from main component I have to pass the state down to add to cart function as well, and add to our icons function as well. Okay, so icons not function but icons component. Okay, so let's say I will be passing our quantity to our let's say header, because our add to cart icon is in our header. So let's say we will be passing our quantity to this header, and then inside header we will accept our quantity. Okay, QUANTITY quantity, and then we will pass quantity right to our icons. So its quantity is again equal to quantity, and then from our icons we will display this quantity into our icon. So let's say where that icon is, right over here. Okay, so let's first accept our quantity, and let's display this quantity right over here. Okay, so that's it. So just save this thing, and if we save this thing and open our browser, you can see that it is still 0. But now if I come to our let's say app.js, which is our main component, and make this to 10 and save this thing, so you can see that it is being reflected in our this component. Okay, but it is very much complex because we are passing quantity one step down to header, then we are passing one step down to icons. Okay, so it is confusing. Okay, we are done with this thing. The second thing we have to do is to just pass down quantity to our second component, which is obviously this single product card. Okay, so let's say since we don't need our main quantity there, we just want to update, so we will be passing this set quantity function to our main content. Okay, so let's say set quantity is equal to set quantity. We are passing that one, and outside our main component we will pass this to our product. Okay, so set quantity. Okay, so before that we have to catch that function. Okay, set let me just copy that thing so I don't forget. So set quantity will be here, as well as it will also be passed to our product, and inside product we will also catch this thing. So we will be catching, and after that once you click on this button add to cart, we will just increment the quantity. Now obviously you guys can get the quantity from the input being passed. Okay, you guys can do that, but for simplicity I'm just will be incrementing the quantity by 1. Okay, so let's say on click we will just pass an arrow function, and we will set the call the function set quantity. We will get the previous quantity, and let's say previous, and then we will just what we will say is that previous plus 1. Okay, it's that simple. Okay, so let's save this thing, and now if I open my browser and if I click on this add to cart, okay, so we are getting null. So let's see that what is being wrong. So it's previous plus 1. Okay, so if I do something like this return, so let's see what thing goes. Okay, sorry, so I have forgotten the return keyword, so it's working fine now. So what we can do is we can just implement this function. So if I refresh this thing, so you can see that now the state is at the default position of 10, because if I go to my main component right over here, which is this app component, in our add component the state is 10. Okay, so by default it's 10, but whenever we click any of these buttons, we can see the quantity is being incremented. Okay, obviously you can get the quantity from this input field if you like, but for now simply I'm just using this to increment it by 1. Okay, so that's the overall concept. So let's say let's make it 0, and let's check it one more time. So it's 0, it's 1, it's 2, it's 3, and it's 4, and it's 5. So that's the use case we have discussed by lifting the state up to our main component. Now obviously this solves our problem. Okay, we know that this is solving our problem, but the problem here is that, let's say if we are having more complex scenario, the complex scenario is that we are having more nested components in our hierarchy, and then we have to pass all these props and callback functions to that component. So it will get very much messy and it will get very much confusing. So this is where the Redux comes into the picture. Okay, so Redux solves this problem by just providing you a store, and that's it. That's the overall concept of Redux. So let's now switch to our main agenda, which is implementing our. So now leaving uh, we are leaving our lifting state concept, and now we are jumping to implement Redux, and we will implement Redux obviously with the help of Redux Toolkit. Okay, so that's the overall concept. So with that said, let's get started with the Redux Toolkit. Okay, so for implementing Redux Toolkit, we need two different libraries. So let me just open one more terminal. Okay, so in here we need two different libraries, and if you guys go to my markdown, and inside my markdown I have defined all the steps right over here. So we need Redux Toolkit as well as React Redux. So I will just copy this thing, and I will go and just paste it over here. So it will get Redux Toolkit as well as React Redux library for me, and will install this library in my project. So that's done. So if I come to my package.json file, so you guys can see over here I'm having React Redux as well as Redux Toolkit in my main core dependencies. Okay, so that's the overall concept. So the very first thing before implementing Redux we have to do is to configure our store. Okay, so if you come to my markdown, the number one is to configure our store. Okay, and we will be configuring this store in obviously the entry point of our application. So we will configure our store, and we will configure at our entry point of application. Okay, so we will be configuring our store at our entry point of our application. So let's say our entry point is obviously our main.jsx. So we will come over here and we will import uh, a function, and that function will be configure store, and this will be being imported from our Redux Toolkit. Okay, and then we can do is we will just make a function something like const store, and let's say that is equal to configure store, and that's it. Okay, so now we have successfully created our very first thing, which is our Redux store. Okay, so if you go to this diagram right over here, if I scroll up, and let's say if I go to Redux, in working of Redux, we can see that we are done with this step. We have created our store. Okay, so once you have created your store, the very next thing you have to do is to pass reducers inside your store. Okay, so since we know that the store will be having some reducers, and that reducers will be having our main logic against our action types. Okay, so we can do is we can just pass an object, and right now we will pass our reducer. And for now, let's say since we have not configured any reducer, I will just pass an empty object. So that's it. Okay, so we have configured our store, we have passed reducer, which is for now it is an empty object. Okay, so the next step, if you go to my markdown, the next step will be obviously to provide the Redux store to React by wrapping the React app with the provider. So we will be having provider, and with the help of that provider we will pass our store to our React app, and that will connect our React app with our, so let's say that will connect our React app with our UI component. So this is this provider right over here. Okay, so this provider will connect our Redux store with the UI component. So let's implement that step. Okay, so for that we need provider, and obviously we will be importing our provider from another library, which is React Redux. So let's import our provider, Okay, so I think it's provider. Okay, I'm spelling that right. It's provider. Okay. So that's provider, and it's being pulled from our React Redux library. Okay, and with the help of this provider, we can pass our store to this our React application. So I will come over here. I will use this provider, and I will wrap this complete application inside this provider. That's it. And once you wrap your application, okay, I missed this sign. So once you wrap your application with the provider, so after wrapping application you can pass the store something like this. So we'll pass the store with this store which we have recently configured right over here. Okay, so that's the second step. So now we have created our store, we have provided our store to our React application. Now this provider will have the responsibility to pass this store down in our component hierarchy, which is this app, and then from app it will go to sidebar, header, main content, and down to all the subcomponents. Okay, so that's the second concept. So let's go to our Redux toolkit and let's see the next step. Now the next step is the important one. Obviously it is the part where we will be creating our slice, our reducers, we will be defining our initial state, and we will be defining our actions. Okay, so let's get to the next part. Okay, and we usually define our reducers in a separate folder. So let's say I will come over here, I will create a new folder inside source directory, and I will call this reducers. Okay, so once we get our reducers, we will create our very first reducer, and let's say we are naming this reducer as quantity, QUANTITY, quantity reducer dot js. Okay, so this will be our quantity reducer, and in this file we will create our very first reducer. Okay, so before defining our reducer, obviously we will define the very first thing, which is our initial state. Okay, so for now, since we know that our initial state will be obviously will be 0, so we can say that const initial state, that is equal to obviously with the value of 0. Okay, so the initial state will be obviously having the value of 0, so that's our initial state. Okay, after that we will create our very first reducer. So let's say we are naming our reducer something like a slice. Okay, so we will create our very first slice, and in that slice we will be having our reducers. Okay, and that reducers will work against our action type. So that's the overall concept. So let's say I'm having a quantity slice. Okay, a quantity slice, and let's say that is equal to, now for creating a slice we need one more thing to import from our library Redux Toolkit, and that will be obviously create slice function. Okay, so that is create slice, and it will be important from our Redux Toolkit library, and we will create our very first slice. Okay, and inside this slice obviously we will pass an object, and this object will be having the very first property, which is name. In our context, let's name it something like quantity, QUANTITY, quantity. Okay, so again you can differentiate it according to your needs. Since in our context we are working with quantity of our product, so I am naming it as quantity. Okay, so we will give the name, and then we will pass our initial state. Okay, so it is having a unique name, initial state, and then obviously since we know that slice will be having reducer, so the very next thing is that we will pass our reducers right over here. And since this reducers is an object, and inside this object we will write all of our reducers. Okay, so since we know that reducers will work on our action type, okay, so let's now inside our reducers let's define our action type. So let's say the only action type we need in our context is to increase our quantity. So I will just type increase, QUANTITY. Okay, increase quantity is obviously our very first action type, and inside this action type it will accept a arrow function, and in this arrow function we will write the main logic, which will run against this action type, and that action type is obviously is equal to this one, this increase quantity. Okay, so this increase quantity is an action type, and it is a part of our reducers. Okay, so inside reducers we will be having our very first action type, increase quantity, and this increase quantity will have the access to our state. So this is the state, which is this one, initial state. Okay, so what we can do is inside this increase quantity we can just write our main logic, and since we are dealing with the simplest logic, we can just write that we want our state dot value to be incremented by 1. So it is just plus plus. Okay, we will just increment our state value with 1, and that's the only logic we are having right now. Okay, so once you have written your slice, and inside slice you have defined your reducers and your action types. So once you are done with this, you are ready to go. Okay, so now what we can do is, if you look at our markdown, we have to, after defining all these initial state, the slice with reducers and defining action types, when you are done with this, you have to just pass reducers to your configure store function. That's it. Okay, so obviously we need to pass this to our main store, which is right in our main JSX. So we have to export something from here. So let's say we want to export our obviously slice, so we can say export default, and we will be default importing our quantity slice dot reducer. Okay, so what this will do is this will just get the reducer from our create slice function. Okay, so create slice, it will return our reducer right over here, and we will default export that. Okay, and we need obviously we also need our actions, which is our increase quantity, because we will use these actions to dispatch from our component. So we need these actions also to be exported. So what I can say, I will say export const, and we will export them as an object, and since our case will be increased quantity, and we will get these from counter, sorry, not counter, it's quantity slice dot actions. Okay, so this create slice will be having two different objects, will have access to two different objects. Number one will be actions and reducers, and we are getting them from actions, and we are exporting them from our file. So that's the overall concept. Okay, the next concept is obviously import our this quantity slice reducer in our main.js. So we'll come over here and we will import, let's say we will name it as quantity reducer, and we will import this quantity reducer from dot backslash reducer slash quanter reducer dot js, which is this file right over here. Once we imported our quantity reducer, we will just come over here. We will name this reducer with some value. Let's say I'm calling this as quantity. So let's say quantity quantity, and that is equal to our quantity reducer right over here. Okay, so we need to provide a different key for this quantity reducer, and that different key in our case is quantity right over here. Okay, so once you have defined your reducer, you have plugged your reducer in configure store function, and that's everything you have to do. Now we can directly go and access this state from our UI component. So let's save everything. Once you save everything, you can go to our app component, and now we don't need this to be here because we are saving our state in Redux store, so we don't need that one, and we don't need to pass down. So I will just close this thing from here, as well as I will also delete this thing, and from our header we don't need to accept our quantity. We'll just remove here. Okay, we will remove this thing from here as well, and inside icons we will also remove our quantity from here, and after that we just have, for now it will be 0. Okay, and after that if I come to main, from our main content, I will also remove set quantity from here. Okay, as well as from here. Okay, so that's, and inside our product we will not be accepting set quantity. Just remove this thing, and we will also be removing this one from here, right over here. Okay, so let's remove this thing, save this thing, and now you can see our state is completely disappeared. Okay, so we are not managing our state using the lifting the state up concept. Okay, so we have removed all the factors. Now we can directly access the state with the help of two different hooks which are given by Redux Toolkit. Number one is use dispatch, and number two is use selector. Okay, so the very first thing we need to do is to, since we know, if you come to our component hierarchy, uh, we need to access our quantity in our icons component. So let's go to icons component directly. Okay, and now right here I can simply import use selector hook, because use selector hook is the only hook which help us to select data from our Redux store. So I will come over here, I will just import use selector, okay, and that use selector, okay, it's use selector with small, okay, so that use selector will be important from our Redux toolkit. So let me just remove this thing for now. I think it's importing from the wrong place. Okay, so let's see, it will, okay, so it's not a part of Redux toolkit, it's a part of React Redux library. Okay, so use selector, and it is a part of React Redux library right over here. Okay, so if we have imported our use selector hook, and now what we can do is we can just say const quantity that is equal to use selector, and this selector will be having the access to our state. So in our case I will mention state right over here, and then from our state we will access our quantity, okay, and quantity dot value. Okay, now this makes you a little bit confusing, okay, that where this state dot quantity dot value is coming from, obviously. Okay, so let's say the state means that all of the reducers we are talking about. Okay, so if I go to my main entry point, which is this main.jsx, you can see our all of our reducers, since we are having only one reducer right now, which is this quantity. Okay, and this quantity is this one right over here. Okay, so state dot quantity. So once we get to that reducer, and then from quantity we know that we have defined our initial state something like this. Okay, so if I go to my reducer, so inside our reducer we know that we are having a value which is of type 0. So this is the value which is we are getting. Okay, so it's if I go to icon, so it's state dot quantity dot value. So that's the overall concept. And now if I copy this thing and if I paste it right over here, that's it, simple. Save this thing, and now if I come to my browser, you guys can see that we are having the quantity of 0. If I refresh this thing, I'm still having the quantity of equal to 0. Now let's say if I somehow go to my reducer and I change my initial quantity to, let's say, 10, save this thing, now you can see that my quantity is directly coming from my Redux store. Okay, because this is automatically, this has been come to 10. So that's the power of Redux. So you can see that I'm directly accessing my state from my icons component. I don't have to pass down through prop. So that's one concept. Okay, so let's now change our quantity. For changing our quantity, what we can do is, since we know if I come to my markdown, I have to access, I have to change my quantity from this component, which is single product card. Okay, so I will just come to my product card. So this is our product, and here you can see that we are having that button which will change the product quantity right over here. Okay, so from here we can directly update our state in Redux store. So for that we need use dispatch. So import, and we will use dispatch. Use dispatch, and this will be imported again from React Redux. Okay, so I will just make it something like const, we will get dispatch equals to use dispatch. Okay, so this is the concept of how to use dispatch in your component. Okay, so once you get the dispatch, you have to define two different things. Okay, number one is obviously the type of action you are trying to fire, and the second one is obviously some extra information. Okay, so right now we are not defining any extra information. What we can do is we can just simply come over here, and we have to dispatch the action. Okay, so since it is right now you can see that it is saying that inside dispatch you have to pass in action, and that action can be of any type. Okay, so since we know that we have already defined our actions in our reducer, so if you come over here you can see that we are exporting this action right from our reducer. Okay, so that action is increased quantity, so we can directly import increased quantity in our that product component. So I can come over here, I can say that import increase quantity, and that is being imported from our quantity reducer. So once you get that action, you have to just come over here, you can say increase quantity, and you have to call that action something like this as a function. Okay, so once you have set this thing, you can just save your project, and once you go to our browser, and if I add my card, you can see the quantity is being automatically updated in my this icons component right over here. If I'm clicking over here, you can see the quantity is automatically being implemented. And once you dispatch some action, we know that it will go to our reducer, which is this quantity reducer, and it will inside in this reducers list, it will look for this increased quantity action. Once it get to action, it will execute your logic, and once it execute your logic, it will just after that it will update your complete components, okay, with the help of that provider which we have parsed. So it will notify the provider that yes, the store has changed, so go and update yourself. So that's the overall concept of Redux. Okay, so that is the overall concept of Redux Toolkit, how to implement Redux. So I think there is only one concept which is left for right now, and I think I have missed that thing. So if I come to my markdown, if I scroll down to somewhat like here, you can see that in our working of Redux, we have discussed that we can pass an action, and that action will be having a type of action, and obviously with that type we can also pass some extra information right over here. Okay, so I think we have to discuss that concept, but how we can pass some extra information when we are dispatching some action. Okay, so let's come to our application, and let's say that right now we are obviously incrementing our state with one value, and let's say I don't want to do that. Okay, I want to increase the quantity of our products with some custom number. Okay, so let's say inside our product we are dispatching this action, and I want some custom value from this input field right from here. Okay, so let's say let's first grab this value from our input. So let's say it's const, and let me just make it current quantity. Okay, and it's set current QUANTITY, and that is equal to react dot use state, and let's say it's by default it will be 0. Okay, and I've created this state just to get value from our input, and let's say our value is obviously will be equal to current quantity, and on change we will just come over here, we will pass an arrow function event, and then we will just say that's over here. Okay, so once we get this value, we can just pass this current quantity into our dispatch function. Okay, and for that we have to just pass this current quantity right over here. Okay, so once you pass this value in our action, you can access this value in our reducer. Okay, so for that you have to just go to our reducer, and inside this reducer we will be having a second attribute which is always known as payload, and then we can get this value by let's say let's console log first. Okay, so let's console dot log, and let's say it's payload. Okay, so once you do that, you save this thing, you come into our let's say application, and now let's make it full, and right click, and let's open our developer console. Okay, so let me just make it a bit bigger. Let's go to console, clear the console, and let's say for now if I click on this button add to cart, you can see that in our console we are having our object being displayed, and inside this object we are having our payload set to 0. Okay, so this is the quantity which is coming from our this component, and if I let's say make it something like 10, and if I add to cart, and now you can see our payload is getting 10. Okay, so this is the concept of passing that extra information to our action. Okay, so for that what we can do is we can just come over here. Since we know that inside our payload we are having another payload attribute which will be having our quantity, so what we can do is we can just say state dot value plus equals to payload dot payload. Okay, so that's the overall concept. Let's save this thing, and now let's test our application. So let's close this thing, let's refresh it. Now by default the quantity is 0, so let's say we don't want the quantity to be 0, so we'll come to quantity reducer, and let's mark it to 0, and now the quantity has been set to 0 initially. Okay, so everything is working fine. Let's say I want to buy a MacBook, I want to buy 5 MacBooks. Okay, so I'm very much rich, so that's why I want to buy 5 MacBooks. So let's add this thing to cart, and once you add this thing, you can see 5 has been added to our cart. And let's say I want to buy 10 iPads. Okay, so let's say I want 10 iPads, I'm adding this to cart, so now it gets to 15. Okay, so let's say if I want to buy 7 XPS, so let's add to cart, and now it's getting 22. So everything is working fine, and so this is the concept of Redux, and you can see it's very much clean. Okay, so very much clean. Once you set up all the things, all the concepts, let's say all your reducers, and you configure your stores, and obviously your actions, once you are done with that, it's very much easy to use it in your application. Okay, so I hope you liked the video. If you're liking my content, so do like and subscribe this channel. See you in the next crash course. Okay, thanks for watching.